They laughed at her voice. They mocked her hair. They told her she'd never make it. But one barefoot girl from a one-room cabin turned rejection into an empire, heartbreak into hits, and a $20 bus ride into a $600 million legacy. How does someone go from being dismissed and mocked to becoming one of the most beloved figures in the world? What does it take to transform pain into purpose and poverty into power? This is the untold story of Dolly Parton, the woman who refused to quit, even when the world told her to. Dirt floors and distant dreams. Dolly Rebecca Parton entered this world on January 19, 1946, in a one-room cabin in Locust Ridge, Tennessee, deep in the heart of the Great Smoky Mountains. She was the fourth of 12 children. Born into a family where poverty wasn't just a temporary condition or a phase to endure, it was a way of life that defined every waking moment and shaped everything she would eventually become. The kind of poverty that seeps into your bones and never fully leaves, no matter how far you travel from it. Her father, Robert Lee Parton, was a sharecropper and construction worker who could neither read nor write. He worked brutally long days in the tobacco fields until his hands bled and calloused and his back screamed for relief. Yet, the money he brought home was never enough to feed 12 hungry mouths. Her mother, Avie Lee Parton, was a woman of quiet strength who sang old Appalachian ballads to her children even when there was no food on the table. She filled their empty stomachs with melodies instead of meals because melodies were the only currency she had in abundance. Music cost nothing, and love was free. The cabin they called home had no electricity, no running water, and no insulation against the freezing mountain winters. 12 children crammed into a space barely large enough for 4. They slept 3 or 4 to a bed, wrapped in threadbare quilts stitched together from flour sacks by their mother's worn hands. In winter, ice formed on the inside of the windows, and the children would wake shivering before dawn, their breath visible in the frigid mountain air. Dolly would later recall with heartbreaking honesty that they were dirt poor, seriously poor. They didn't have 2 nickels to rub together. But it wasn't just material poverty that scarred her young soul. It was the humiliation that came with it. At school, she was the girl other children whispered about when they thought she couldn't hear. The one who wore clothes stitched together from rags because store-bought dresses existed in a world her family couldn't access. The one whose shoes had holes so big her toes poked through onto the cold schoolhouse floor. She remembered standing in line, watching other girls parade past in their store-bought dresses with matching ribbons, feeling the burn of shame creep up her neck and settle into her chest like a stone. She knew she was poor, but she didn't know she was supposed to be ashamed of it until she saw how people looked at her. The pity in teachers' eyes, the disgust on classmates' faces. Her classmates mocked her relentlessly with the casual cruelty that children perfect so easily. They called her trash. They laughed at her homemade dresses. They excluded her from their circles and their games. The message was delivered daily, without mercy. She didn't belong. She was less than. And that wound carved into her young heart would follow her through decades of success and fame. Some scars never fully heal. They just learn to hide beneath rhinestones and smiles. The doors that slammed shut. When Dolly Parton arrived in Nashville in 1964, she believed her talent would speak for itself. She believed that her voice, her songs, and her determination would be enough to open every door that mattered. She was devastatingly wrong. Nashville was a city built on dreams, but it devoured dreamers without mercy. Every single day, hundreds of young hopefuls flooded into Music Row with guitars slung over their shoulders, convinced they were destined for stardom. Most left broken within months, forgotten and buried under the crushing weight of rejection. Dolly moved into a cramped, roach-infested apartment with barely enough room to turn around. The rent was cheap, but even cheap was expensive when you had nothing. She survived on packets of ketchup, stolen from diners, handfuls of crackers, and whatever free food she could scrounge without completely sacrificing her dignity. Some nights she went to bed with her stomach growling loud enough to keep her awake. The hunger, a cruel echo of the childhood she thought she had escaped. She knocked on every door she could find, record labels, publishing houses, radio stations, anywhere that might give her even the smallest chance. But the doors didn't just close politely. They slammed hard enough to rattle her faith in everything she believed about herself. Executives looked at her and saw a joke. They saw a girl with too much makeup, hair piled impossibly high, and clothes too tight for respectable Nashville society. They heard her thick mountain accent and dismissed her before she even opened her mouth to sing. One executive told her bluntly that she was too country for country music. Another laughed in her face and said Nashville didn't need another nobody. The cruelest rejections came when they actually let her sing. She would pour every ounce of her heart into a performance, notes trembling with genuine emotion, only to be met with indifferent shrugs and wandering eyes. They said her voice was too high-pitched, her songs were too simple. She would never be taken seriously. Every rejection carved a little deeper into her confidence. Every dismissal whispered the same lie she had heard throughout her childhood. "You're not good enough. You don't belong here." And in those moments, completely alone in her tiny apartment with the roaches and the hunger, Dolly wondered if maybe they were right. The Gilded Cage. When Dolly joined the Porter Wagoner Show in 1967, it felt like a dream finally realized. After years of rejection, hunger, and obscurity, she was on national television, performing for millions of viewers every week. Porter Wagoner was a household name, and now she was standing beside him, singing duets, sharing the spotlight, earning a steady paycheck for the first time in her life. The show was a phenomenon. Week after week, audiences fell in love with the chemistry between Porter and Dolly. Their voices blended beautifully. Their banter felt natural and warm. Her star began to rise. Her face became recognizable. Her songs started climbing the charts. She was no longer the nobody Nashville had dismissed. She was becoming someone. But behind the rhinestones and the applause, a darker truth was taking root. Porter Wagoner wasn't just her mentor and partner. He was becoming her controller. At first, the arrangement seemed reasonable. Porter had given Dolly her big break, and in return, he expected loyalty. He managed her career, booked her shows, and guided her decisions. He told her what to wear, what to sing, and how to present herself on camera. Dolly, grateful and still somewhat naive about the industry's darker mechanics, went along with it. After all, Porter knew the business. He had been a star for years. She trusted him completely. But trust can be a dangerous thing when placed in the wrong hands. Porter's control began to tighten like a noose around her creative throat. He didn't just manage her career, he owned it. The contract she had signed tied her to him in ways she hadn't fully understood when pen met paper. He took a significant percentage of her earnings. He controlled her recording sessions. He had final say over which songs she could release to the public. When Dolly wrote something deeply personal, something she was genuinely proud of, Porter would often dismiss it without consideration, insisting she record his choices instead. He treated her like property. He didn't see her as an artist with her own vision. He saw her as an extension of his brand, a pretty accessory to enhance his empire. The creative suffocation became unbearable. Dolly was a songwriter at heart, a storyteller who poured her entire soul into every lyric she crafted. But Porter wanted her to be his sidekick, his pretty blonde co-star who smiled on command, sang on cue, and never stepped out of the lines he had drawn. He wanted her to stay exactly where he had placed her, beside him, below him, dependent on him entirely. And when Dolly dared to push back, when she gathered the courage to voice her own opinions, the battles began. They fought constantly. Heated arguments erupted backstage after shows. Tense silences stretched through rehearsals. Bitter standoffs over song choices turned into wars of attrition. Porter could be charming and generous one moment, then cold and manipulative the next. He wielded his power like a weapon, reminding her again and again that without him, she would be nothing. She would return to obscurity. She would fade back into the mountains she had fought so hard to escape. Empire of her own. When Dolly Parton finally broke free, she stood at a crossroads. She had her freedom, but freedom came with terrifying uncertainty. No manager, no guaranteed income, a mountain of debt from buying out her contract. The industry whispered that she had made a mistake, that without Porter she would fade into obscurity. They were catastrophically wrong. Her first move was bold and defiant. She took "I Will Always Love You," the song she had written as a farewell to Porter, and released it as a single. The song was raw, vulnerable, and heartbreakingly honest. It shot to #1 on the country charts. It wasn't just a hit, it was a cultural moment. People didn't just hear a breakup song. They heard a woman reclaiming her voice. Throughout the late 1970s, she released a string of iconic songs that would define her legacy. Jolene in 1973, a haunting ballad about jealousy and insecurity. Here You Come Again in 1977, a crossover pop hit that proved she could dominate beyond country music. And in 1980, she released 9 to 5, the anthem of working-class America. A song that became not just a hit, but a movement. 9 to 5 shot to #1 on both the country and pop charts, sold over 1 million copies, and earned her an Academy Award nomination. For a woman who had once been told she was too country and too much, crossing over into pop and film was a triumph that silenced every doubt. She wasn't just a country star anymore, she was a global icon. In the early 1980s, her empire continued to expand. She launched her own production company, taking full control of her music, her image, and her business. She became one of the first female country artists to own her masters, a move that would later earn her hundreds of millions of dollars. But perhaps her most audacious dream came in 1986 when Dolly opened Dollywood, a theme park in the Smoky Mountains, just miles from the one-room cabin where she was born. Critics scoffed. A country singer opening a theme park seemed like a vanity project destined to fail. But Dolly knew something they didn't. She knew that people didn't just want to visit a theme park. They wanted to visit her story. Today, Dollywood attracts over 3 million visitors a year.
Dollywood park visitors may have recently noticed some hints in the park related to a new attraction coming in 2026.
And has become the largest employer in the region, providing jobs and hope to communities that had been forgotten. The sweetest vindication came in the 1990s, when Whitney Houston covered "I Will Always Love You" for the film The Bodyguard. The song became a global phenomenon, selling over 20 million copies. Because Dolly owned the publishing rights, she earned millions from that single cover alone. The woman they had called dumb had outsmarted an entire industry. The darkness behind the smile. To the world, Dolly Parton had it all: fame, fortune, adoration from millions. But behind the glittering image was a woman battling demons that no amount of success could silence. At the center of her private life was a paradox few understood. Dolly Parton, one of the most famous women in the world, was also one of the loneliest. In 1966, she had married Carl Thomas Dean, a quiet, reserved man she met outside a laundromat on her first day in Nashville. Carl was the opposite of everything Dolly was. He shunned the spotlight, avoided crowds, and wanted nothing to do with fame. While Dolly chased stages and cameras, Carl stayed home. In over 5 decades of marriage, he has been photographed with her only a handful of times. The price of her career was absence. Dolly was constantly on the road. Weeks turned into months away from home. Phone calls replaced conversations. Letters replaced intimacy. And then, in the mid-1980s, the weight became too much. Dolly suffered a devastating emotional collapse. She has spoken about it only sparingly, but she has confessed that during this period, she battled severe depression, anxiety, and even thoughts of suicide. She was successful by every measure, but inside she felt empty and worthless. She couldn't see a way forward. She later revealed that one particularly dark day, she sat alone with a loaded gun, contemplating ending it all. But just as despair threatened to swallow her whole, something stopped her. Her dog, a little companion she adored, came running into the room, wagging its tail, eyes full of innocent love. That dog looked at her like she was the whole world, and she realized if she did this, who would take care of him? That fragile moment of grace pulled her back from the edge. Dolly sought help, therapy, medication, and the support of the few people she trusted. Slowly, painfully, she began to rebuild herself from the inside out. She learned that it's okay not to be okay, that you can be strong and still break, and that breaking doesn't mean you're weak. It means you're human. The losses continued to pile up over the years. Her younger brother Larry, who struggled with addiction. Her baby brother Floyd, who died while she was performing thousands of miles away. Her longtime friend Kenny Rogers, whose death hit her harder than most people realized. And her parents, Robert Lee and Avi Lee, whose deaths left wounds that would never fully heal. Each loss was a reminder of how fragile everything is, how quickly the people we love can be taken from us. The legacy that outlives the legend. While other celebrities built monuments to themselves, Dolly built something different, a legacy of giving. A legacy rooted not in ego, but in empathy. Because Dolly Parton, the girl who grew up in crushing poverty, never stopped being that girl. She never forgot what it felt like to have nothing. In 1995, she created the Imagination Library, a program that mails free books to children from birth to age 5. The idea was simple but profound. Every child, no matter how poor, deserves access to books. What started as a local program in Sevier County, Tennessee, has since exploded into a global phenomenon. Today, the Imagination Library operates in 5 countries and has gifted over 200 million books to children around the world. When devastating wildfires swept through the Smoky Mountains in 2016, Dolly launched the My People Fund, giving $1,000 a month for 6 months to every family who lost their home. Over $12 million was distributed. No questions asked, no applications, no red tape. These were her people, and when your people are hurting, you show up. And then came 2020. When the pandemic swept across the globe, Dolly quietly donated $1 million to Vanderbilt University Medical Center. That donation helped fund the development of the Moderna vaccine. Dolly didn't announce it with fanfare. She just did it. Her donation literally helped save millions of lives. At 78 years old, Dolly Parton shows no signs of slowing down. She still writes music, still performing, still runs her empire with the same sharp business mind that built it. She has no children of her own, a fact that once brought her deep sadness. But she's come to see it differently now. She has millions of children. Every child who gets a book from the Imagination Library is hers. Every family she helped after the fires is hers. Her songs will echo long after the lights go down. Her generosity will ripple through generations yet to come. But the question remains, how does a single life, born in poverty and shaped by struggle, leave a mark so profound that it changes the world itself? And what lessons are still waiting for us in the footprints she left behind? Dolly Parton's story isn't finished. It's a challenge, an invitation, and a reminder that the smallest acts of courage and kindness can create legacies far larger than ourselves.